Hi everyone, my name is Ken Hart. I'm the founder and CEO of Snowdrop Solutions, and I have a tremendous pleasure to be with Nicola Dalmazzo of Google Maps today, here to connect the dots with Snowdrop. So Nicola, welcome. Glad you made the trip. I've known Nicola for several years now, but maybe for everyone else, a little background, what you do at Google, how long you've been there, and why you're working in financial services.
Okay. Well, my story with Google is quite long. I'm in the company since 12 years. And during these 12 years, I covered different roles, a little bit of advertising, especially working with also big corporation in travel. And in the last 4 years, I'm sales in Google Maps platform. That is the part of Google Maps that work with enterprise. And about your question of finance, finance is not really the first things you can think when you think about maps, right?
No, usually
right?
not.
Exactly. And the reality is that for many years, we always have a small place in a website or an app of the banks, for example. That was more like what we call a store locator, right? Or an ATM locator. To find your bank before they found you. But in the recent years, we started to do a lot of things, and that's also a little bit thanks to Snowdrop, I would say, yeah.
So we've worked together for a couple of years, both in Southeast Asia and in Europe. What's the differences? What have you observed, cultural or structural differences between those two regions?
Sure. Well, there are many differences, but if we stay in finance, I can tell you that we really saw coming a little bit as a storm this innovation that started in London, with the so-called challenging bank or digital bank or fintech. Basically, we see the technology coming and disrupting really the market. Also, this idea of having the app at the center of the relation with the customer. And this was a bit born really in Europe and more in London, right? Maybe you can also tell something because you were there, right, when this happened. And that's happened there. And then, Asia was a bit looking at it, saying, oh, maybe this is coming. In Asia, as you can imagine, there are also massive apps that really also drive innovation, right? So some of these apps, like the social app I'm talking about, TikTok, for example, is coming from Asia. We have also WeChat that is coming also from Asia. They were looking into that. The banks were also looking into that. And I think that it's a way that is inevitable, right? So technology will come, and this comparison between every app will always happen, right? So even when I open an app of a bank, I compare it with TikTok. I compare with maybe how easy it is to use Google Maps, right? So I think our role is to try to help with the technology of Google to make the app of any bank better, closer to the user, and probably also do more than just be a report, just be a bank, right?
Yeah, it makes sense. I remember, coming back to what you mentioned, when we started working with people like Monzo and Starling back in London, gosh, I want to say 3, 4, 5 years ago. I remember coming out of these meetings and thinking, okay, they want to do something different. They want to challenge the traditional banks. Here we are 4 or 5 years later, and I would say, by giving them the tools and the technology to create these better user experiences, there has been a real resetting of what is an appropriate benchmark. When I grew up, you would wait in a taxi to come by. You'd raise your hand and you'd get wet in the rain. You didn't know where the taxis were, you just waited. Now, if I said it to my 17-year-old daughter, get a taxi, to her, the default setting is Uber, right? So it's like, of course I'm going to see where the taxis are. The user experience is, of course it's on my mobile phone. And I think what's happened in some places, it's like Monzo and Starling have reset what is an acceptable user experience. So again, these are little banks, started up in the UK, mobile only, and now what I see now is the big banks are kind of, okay, I'm going to embrace this. Some of them, trying to do it themselves, some of them working with partners. At least that's my impression in my travels and discussions. From a Google Maps perspective, what advice would you give to some of these more traditional banks that's looking at these digital banks in terms of what they need to do and how they need to do it to try and catch up with that redefined benchmark of a better user experience?
Sure. Google Maps, before going into service for companies, it's a very big app, right? A user app.
A billion plus consumers, right?
Exactly, that are using this every day for several reasons. The two main that I would say is, first of all, very accurate data, and data that are reliable, is a mix of proprietary data, but also a mix of UGC, so really contribution of real people, right? Mm-hmm. Me, you, when you visit a restaurant.
Exactly. It has wheelchair access. Stuff.
And then on top of this, we have very engaging UX UI, right? So way to connect with the user, allow the user to search for something, but also to deliver this data in a very engaging way, right? When you drive, you have a view. When you walk, you have another view. When you just revise a restaurant, you have another way of interacting, right? And this is the two most important things, I would say, when you want to build like a very strong app, right? So it has to be very rich with the data that you're looking for, but also the access to this data, right, has to be very simple and intuitive for different type of people, right? Adaptive probably as well. So when we approach, these, for example, the use cases that maybe we're going to talk a little bit about transaction enrichment, I think it's very important, these two elements, right? So the bank, they always had all this data about the transaction, about the people, right? But one way is having the data, and one way is to presenting in a way that is comprehensible and also engaging somehow, right? So we are trying to do this. We are trying to help these companies to be a little bit like Google Maps, as an example, right? In their own app. But at the same time, from my experience going a little bit around the world, banks are somehow, some of them, right, still kind of traditional companies, right? Mm-hmm. Where the IT company has already so many big issue to solve, also to change today, with the new technology of cloud, etc., etc. So sometimes working, with a partner, for example, as Snowdrop, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that, can definitely make this change faster because users are not waiting, right? The Monzo, the Starling, the Revolut are already there. New also form of payment are there, right? So the banks are a little bit challenged from everywhere. They cannot wait like 5 more years to do this changing, right?
One of the things I would advocate to the banks is be more pragmatic. You don't have to build everything yourselves, right? I mean, from a Snowdrop perspective, we've worked with your technology for many, many years. So what used to take us months to build, now, literally, through our API, you can launch in a weekend.
I agree with you, and the fun fact is also that building all the infrastructure, changing these big things, of course, require much more time, right? And so the bank can maybe redirect this kind of resources that they have internally to that things, right? And really maybe learn and using these APIs. And APIs is so simple to implement in an app, in a website, right? So, and we have this kind of double role of us to giving the best technology with the reliable timing also of answering and all this. And then a partner like you with MRS to wrap it in something that can be easily implemented, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's the best combination. Of course, also another thing that I saw a little bit, banks are not historically, they don't have like huge capability when it comes to UX UI, right?
It's not their core strength.
Exactly.
It's just not part of their DNA.
Exactly. And sometimes they also rely with external supporter, etc. Sometimes they buy white label pieces, for example, where the PFM is, right? Where that are quite standard or they cannot be modified so much. But with our technology, it's very simple to do it, right? You call an API, and this will create a map, right? So these kind of things is quite simple to do.
Even to add to that, working the UX is often not thought of as a priority. It's not a must-have; it's thought of as a nice-to-have. Yeah. I would argue, as you see people go to Revolut, or certainly use Revolut when they travel, or shift increasingly young people to these alternative banks, it's increasingly becoming, no, we got to really have a better user experience.
We talk a lot about this acronym MRS, just for people that don't know, what is it and how does it work?
Sure. So it stands for Merchant Reconciliation System. It's an API that we built using Google Maps and Google Cloud, where we manage a lot of transactions, meaning we take the messy information from a payment processing scheme, we clean it up, we find the match, where's the merchant in Google Maps, and then we would come back with the correct information.
Okay. Give me an example, really, like from the user point of view, right?
Last week, my family, we went out to an Italian restaurant. Good place called Mamma Mia. It came back on our joint bank statement, Gromecca. My wife looks and says, what is this? We've never been to Gromecca. We've been hacked. And that was the name of the franchise owner, Mamma Mia being a franchise. So what we do, that MRS will take that messy information or erroneous information, and we'll say, hey, Mamma Mia is Mamma Mia, here it is in Google Maps, here's the address, and we'll come back, we'll find the logo. By knowing exactly where the transaction takes place, the merchant, there's a lot of benefits. So one bank in the UK, something like, I can't remember the exact number, I think it was like 65 out of 66 times they block a card, it's not really fraud. Mm-hmm. It's just, what is it for the user? Frustration. What is it for the bank? A nightmare. People call in, they have to do security analysis and understand if there's a real problem, unblock the card. And then, so no one wins when there's a false positive and fraud. So by having that level of transaction enrichment, not only can the end user avoid moments of anxiety and confusion, but the bank can also get about doing their business in a smarter way. They can redeploy call center resources instead of people calling and saying, I don't understand Gromecca, right? That problem disappears. Instead, they can help people fight real problems of fraud and use the resources much more intelligently.
Yes, so here we are talking about making the bank having better information for them, right? So for security, for also maybe non-blocking cards when you are abroad and all this. Then transforming and sharing this information with user to reduce anxiety, to increase also understanding of their spending, and then potentially have a very strong database where you can build things on top, right?
Analytics, tools, rewards, personal finance management. Yeah, so once you have that clear, accurate, well understood semantic layer of information, like the real world information, people don't spend money at BK.
Sure.
People spend money at Burger King. Show Burger King, damn it. That's what people understand. And that's what the bank needs to understand and ingest that real information so they could offer a range of other services with that. Thank you for joining us today. This has been Ken Hart from Snowdrop Solutions with my guest, Nicola Dalmazzo of Google Maps. If you have any questions or queries, don't hesitate to reach out to Snowdrop at snowdropsolutions.co.uk or Snowdrop Solutions on LinkedIn.